This is the Alden Report.
Hey, it's Mike Alden. I hope you're enjoying the Alden Report as much as I am. I love bringing to you new and exciting people that add value to your life. I'm also super excited to announce my latest book, Bestseller Secrets. Listen, if you're an author, maybe you're thinking about writing a book, maybe you've already written a book, maybe you're an entrepreneur and you want to continue to grow your brand, maybe you're an entrepreneur and you want to bring in more leads, maybe you're a stay-at-home mom and you wrote a cookbook or a children's book, maybe you wrote a fantasy book, a self-help book, a tell-all book, a novel. It doesn't really matter. In my latest book, Bestseller Secrets, I give you all the information that I've literally spent millions of dollars trying to figure this thing out, and I'm going to give it to you absolutely free with my book, Bestseller Secrets. Go to bestsellersecretsbook.com. Again, it's bestsellersecretsbook.com. I give you all the information that I've spent literally millions of dollars trying to figure this whole world out. My books have gone on to do amazing things. I'm a 3-time Wall Street Journal, USA Today bestselling author. I've hit #1 on Amazon hundreds of times. My books have been the #1 book in the world against all books in every category. And I've also done this for other authors. And I'm giving you this information absolutely free. Just go to bestsellersecretsbook.com. You got to pay a small processing fee, but it doesn't really matter, again, because I've spent millions of dollars. And here's the other secret. You can do all this stuff yourself. If you don't have a team, that's okay. If you don't have a lot of time, that's okay. You read the information in my book, again, whether you just started writing a book, whether you've written the book, whether you wrote the book years ago, and you want to kind of resurrect it. In my book, Bestseller Secrets, I show you exactly what you need to do, and I'm giving you the book absolutely free. Go to bestsellersecretsbook.com, download the book, take that information, use it to become a bona fide, legitimate #1 bestseller. I show you how to become a #1 bestseller in less than 24 hours. And again, I'm giving you this information for free. Go to bestsellersecretsbook.com. Again, it's bestsellersecretsbook.com.
This is the Alden Report.
All right. Well, my name is Michael Alden. We are here in Blue Vase Studios. And as I always say, I'm super excited to be here. I'm super excited for my next guest. I just love bringing to you, interesting people from all walks of life that are just doing interesting things, have done interesting things, and continue to impact the world. My next guest is what I like to say, one of the most prolific ghostwriters of our time. He is a New York Times bestselling author. He is a veteran journalist. He's interviewed pretty much anybody who's anybody within the world of celebrity, from musicians to politicians to presidents and everything in between. If I listed all of them now, we wouldn't even be able to get to the interview. So I'm just going to start with that, and we're going to talk a lot about his interactions. And I also am going to pick his brain not only about what he's done as an author for himself and for others, but how he's connected with these people, because to me, that is how we really truly, build our wealth and is through our network. And he's just an amazing guy. We met on this app called Clubhouse. If you're not on it, you need to get on it. Please help me welcome Mr. Glenn Plaskin. Glenn, thanks so much for being my guest, man.
Oh, hey, Mike. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. It's great to see you. It must be a sunny day there. I see you in your sunglasses.
Oh, he's already calling me out on the sunglasses. Listen, everyone knows these are my 99-cent glasses. And I'm also rocking a sweatshirt. This is my friend of mine. He owns a company called Wicked Drones. And so he just gave it to me, and it's really, I literally just got it. So it's super comfortable. But yeah, thanks for calling me out and making fun of me already. He's already making fun of me.
You look good. Reminds me of when I went in a recording studio once with Kanye West. Now, he had his glasses and a big chain, and I always feel like the most uncool person in the room, but it's better to let the other person be the cool one, right?
So you have a really interesting kind of beginning of how you became a writer. You are a classically trained pianist, and then somehow you just entered this whole world of becoming this amazing author and writer. Tell our viewers and listeners about how that happened, because to me it's really interesting.
Thank you. Well, you couldn't plan it, and it was not planned. However, I was studying to be a concert pianist. I started when I was 8 years old, and by the time I was 25, I had already been in a conservatory of music for 9 years in a row for college. So that's a pretty long time, 9 years with no break. And at one point I was about to get a doctoral degree in music. And I knew what was going to happen. I was going to wind up teaching other people how to play the piano. And I didn't think my dream was going to become fulfilled, which was to become an active concert pianist. So anyway, it turns out that wasn't the right dream for me anyway. But the decisions you make at age 17 or 15 or 21 are not always the right decisions that will be right for you later. You can only work with what you've got at that moment, okay? So at age 25, I realized one startling fact. I hated performing. It made me really nervous and unhappy, and I didn't want to be a teacher. So against the advice of pretty much anybody, I quit music. And I moved to New York, and I had no money, no friends, no job, no nothing. But I got myself a day job, and I had one thing. I had an idea for a book. Now, I was not a writer. I have no training as a writer. I never even wrote a college paper, zero training. I never went to journalism school or anything. But I had this one dream, which was to write a book about the most famous pianist in the world, who at that time was named Vladimir Horowitz, and the highest paid pianist in the world. And I came to New York, and I just called up publishers on my own, including Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, the former First Lady, who was then an editor at Doubleday Publishers. And I told them all about my idea. And I believe it or not, I got all of them on the phone. And I was not selling myself, remember, I was selling my idea. And I always tell people, you remember the difference between trying to sell yourself and a great idea. A great idea will sell even when they don't know who you are. So to make a long story short, I ultimately went to the William Morris Agency to find an agent. And I met with the chief agent there. And he said to me, well, what have you written? I said, nothing. He said, well, what have you had published? I said, nothing. He said, then what do you have? And I pulled out of my pocket a list of my 15 publishers. I said, here, all these publishing companies are interested in my idea. And he said, well, where's your book proposal? I thought, gee, I didn't even know what a book proposal was. So I said, oh, don't you worry. I'll go do it. So I don't even know how I did it. Honestly, I'm not exactly sure, but I did write a book proposal, and I came back to the William Morris Agency, which is one of the major talent agencies of the world, still is. And I plunked my proposal down on his desk, and I said, here, I want $50,000. And back then, 50,000 would be equivalent to more than 150,000 today. And he said, well, I don't know if I can even sell it, but it was good. And to make a long story short, he sold it. So within 5.5 months of quitting school, I had a book contract with a major publishing company. And within a year, I picked up the phone and I called the New York Times Sunday Magazine. And I said, hello, I'm the author of the forthcoming biography of this book. And I said, I'd like to write an article for you. And they said, well, what do you got? So I told them what I had, and then they published it. And then after that, they started inviting me to write interviews for them in the New York Times with classical musicians. And when the book was published 3 years later, it took 3 years. And it was very painful. I don't underestimate, or I don't tell anybody this was easy, because remember, I didn't know really how to write a book at that time. But I hired a writing teacher, and I kept giving him samples, and he kept rejecting them. And I kept trying and trying. And slowly I got better. And when it was published, it was literally on the front page of the arts section of the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, the Los Angeles Times, the London Times. In other words, because the person I had written about was so famous, it was reviewed or written about literally all over the world. And I thought one day, as I was sitting in the Beverly Hills Hotel on my book tour, gee, 3 years ago, I was a piano student, and now, how weird, I'm an author. So that's the story.
There's so much to the story, but one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and I've seen some of your interviews as well. So this biography that you wrote about Vladimir Horowitz, it was unauthorized, right? And he was a bit of a recluse, right? How did you decide to, like, how did that work? How do you write a book about somebody who is so secretive about his life? Like, how did that work?
Well, I always tell people that, how do we write a book about Abraham Lincoln or Walt Whitman or anybody, any historical figure who's no longer here to tell us about their life? You know, we have to rely on correspondence and other people's writings and interviews and things like that. So when my subject wouldn't cooperate with me, I had to go around him, and that was very difficult. I interviewed literally hundreds of people who knew him. I collected everything that had ever been written about him. I collected all the recorded interviews that he had ever done. And you become like an archaeologist almost, you know? And I had to dig up as much as I could. And it was very frustrating because it was very funny, actually. He only lived 3 blocks away from where I lived at the time. So there is this person who's legendary living 3 blocks away from me, and yet he won't cooperate. And when the book was published, it did get a lot of attention, partly because it was unauthorized, meaning something that's authorized is censored. It's filtered through making that person make themselves look as good as possible, right? Whereas if it's more objectively done, like a journalist would do it, you would get many points of view. So when the book was published, it became kind of controversial, as you know. It was one of the secrets of my, moving forward. And at the end of that book project, the agent said to me, "Now, would you like to write another book?" I said, "No way. I have no interest. I had had enough writing a book. I thought, this is very difficult." I said, "What I want to do is interview people, famous people." So he got me my first interview with Carol Burnett in Hollywood. And then after that, I did Calvin Klein, who at that time was the hottest fashion designer in the world. And this was for the cover of Playboy magazine. Well, I found I had this uniquely strange ability. Remember, I'm not a trained journalist. I wasn't trained as an interviewer, but because I maybe was so inexperienced, but curious, famous people seemed to warm up to me more and open up more. You know, I was just this regular person. I had no pretenses whatsoever. So Calvin Klein and I would sit there every night for hours talking. And when the interview was published, again, it made headlines. It was successful. And he and I really clicked. And he was one of my mentors. One of the secrets, I think, to moving forward with whatever your dream is that you do need mentors. You need teachers. Notice I asked for help when I got the book contract. I didn't think I could do it alone. I got an assistant. I got a teacher. I got an editor. I got a discographer. I got a secretary to help type. I got a lot of help when I needed it. And I somehow knew intuitively that my strength was in marketing an idea. But in order for me to perfect the technique of actually writing a book, I needed help. There's no problem with needing help. When you need it, you need it. And after I interviewed Calvin Klein, I told him, you know, what I'm really looking for is a full-time job as a journalist. He picked up the phone, literally picked it up and called the owner of a publishing company that published, a magazine called Women's Wear Daily, which is a fashion Bible. And he spoke to the head of the whole thing. And he said, "I have a friend here, Glenn. He's a writer. He's a brilliant writer." And, and he went on and on about me. He said, "I'm sending him over now." And he literally put me in his Mercedes limousine. He gave me his sport jacket that he was wearing. He literally took it off his back and he gave it to me. He said, "Here, you wear this." Well, I was hired. Now, you can get hired, but you can also get fired. And over the next 3.5 years, it was like going to college. They sent me everywhere, to the White House to interview Mrs. Reagan, to the Harvard University to interview the president, interviewing movie stars and society people and painters and artists and musicians. And it was the greatest training. I found that you could become like a jack of all trades. In other words, I could interview anybody, even about things that I knew nothing about. And I could somehow study up on it and interview it and write it. And so that was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. And then from there, my celebrity interviews became more and more important. And I interviewed Elizabeth Taylor and, all kinds of film stars and newsmakers. And eventually I wrote another book called Turning Point. And it's about how 120 celebrities I interviewed, including Dolly Parton and many others, how they overcame a crisis in their life and what they learned from it. And Oprah Winfrey did a whole show on that book, as did Joan Rivers and Larry King and others. And so I literally created a whole, like a cottage industry doing interviews with people who were famous. And I would often become very close to them, like Leona Helmsley, if you remember who she was. She and I became very close friends, and interviewed Al Pacino and Robert De Niro and all kinds of people, Meryl Streep and Bette Midler. And it was really exciting and fun. And that's what happened.
And we got a lot to talk about, and I'm glad you're here today. Again, we're on with Glenn Plaskin. He is a New York Times bestselling author. He's a prolific ghostwriter. He's interviewed, again, like as I said when I opened, pretty much anybody who's anybody within the world of celebrity and the world of politics and just everything in between. If you'd like some more information about Glenn, you could just go to ghostwriteyourbook.com. Again, it's ghostwriteyourbook.com. You just Google him as well, and you'll find all of his stuff out there. I wanted to ask you, Glenn, about, you mentioned some of the people that you've worked with and interviewed, like De Niro and Elizabeth Taylor and Barbara Walters and Diana Ross, Judge Judy, and, early when the first thing you said, Kanye West. I mean, the diversity is just wild. But did you develop a process for which the things that you would do for each and every celebrity? Was there something that you did that that prepared you to go into these interviews, or was it different every time?
I do have a method, yes. Whether it's a fashion designer, a rap star, a movie star, or a criminal, you must do your homework. I'm very kind of obsessive compulsive a little bit about being prepared. So what I would do is I would read as much as I could. If there was a book available, I would read it. And then I would sit there and just free associate and write down all the questions that I would want to ask that person. And then I would create it like a play. In other words, I couldn't just have questions. I had to have them in the right order. And what I used to do is type out the questions or print them out, and then I would Scotch tape them into an accordion so that they could sit on my lap comfortably. Sometimes I would use cue cards, but most of the time I would use Scotch tape. Very old school. And usually I knew the questions pretty well, but it was like a play. I had it all planned out. I always tell people the first thing you need to do is establish rapport with the person. Do not ask them direct questions. That's not what they want. They want a joke. They want a story. They want to get into the bath slowly. So mention something like, oh, I hear that you like chocolate turtles. I said that to Katharine Hepburn, the movie star. And she said, oh, yes, I love chocolate turtles. She said, how did you know that? I said, well, I did some research and I know you like these chocolate turtles. So I pulled out of my bag a box of chocolate turtles. That's just one example. But you want to create some rapport with them so that they just think, oh, this isn't just some bunch of questions. But I would have all the questions laid out from the least threatening to the most controversial, always starting with the most general. Like, for example, when I sat down with Al Pacino, I said, tell me about your movie. Why did you make it? And then you don't talk. Everybody has an interview they're going to give you that's the first layer. You must allow them to give you the first layer. Do not probe at the beginning. Let them just an open-ended question and then don't talk. Now, this works with everybody. You just mustn't talk, and then let them talk and don't interrupt them, and don't let them keep talking until you feel like they run out of gas. And then, of course, the real technique of this is to know, well, where to go next. It's easy to ask the first question, but what about the follow-up? And sometimes this would make me very nervous. I could feel sometimes sweat dripping down my back because I would think, oh my God, you're going out of order. You're not supposed to say that now. I didn't want you to say that now. That's not until part two, Well, that's where my pen comes in handy because I have to quickly in my mind cross off where I'm going. Oh, you want to go over there? Okay, so if it's Diana Ross at lunch, she suddenly wants to talk about A Lady Sings the Blues. That's out of order. I didn't want to talk about that yet. Okay, and then I have my questions all ready for that. So these questions have to be in different colors because I have to be able to get to them quickly. If she's going to bring up Lady Sings the Blues, then I have a whole series of questions about that that are all ready to go. So my eye skips down quickly to those questions, but I can't just look at my paper. I take a quick look and then I look back up again. And I did all this instinctively. Nobody taught me how to do this. I just did this, instinctively. And one time I remember interviewing Sylvester Stallone. I told myself, I'm going to try a new technique. I'm not going to bring my notes with me. I mean, they were with me, but they weren't on my lap. I would always cross my legs so that I could have the notes tipped up toward me. But this time I thought, I'm putting my notes down on the couch, and he was right opposite me. And I just decided I would try something new. I would look right in his eyes and just ask him a question about his birth. He had a botched birth where the guy who delivered him at birth did something to his palate with the forceps. And this was the basis of one of the early adversities of his life. That's why he speaks with slight alteration. And I said, just tell me the story of what happened. And I found that if I didn't look at my questions at all, I could get an even more heart-to-heart connection with the person. So as I got more experienced, I would sometimes refer less to my questions because most of the time I had them memorized, but I always had a script near me so that I could, I had to know where I'm going. And also remember, every interview has a time limit. Sometimes it would be an hour and a half. Sometimes it would be 45 minutes. Sometimes it would be 2 hours. So I knew how much I needed to get. But once I remember interviewing Robert De Niro and they said, you only have 20 minutes. I thought, 20 minutes? I can't do this in 20 minutes. What am I going to get in 20 minutes? Well, guess what? I got almost nothing. He's not known to be a very good interview. I knew that going in, but I thought 20 minutes. I'm not sure 2 hours would have helped, but I found I could write around it, meaning even if somebody wasn't very articulate, like Diane Sawyer and Barbara Walters, or Peter Jennings, these people are highly articulate. But it's not that Robert De Niro isn't articulate, it's that he's not terribly wanting to give you much. And so I wrote a perfectly good interview without him, so to speak, meaning there was almost no quote from him in it. And yet I was able to write about the movie and the characterization of his role and stuff like that. So what I discovered was it almost didn't matter what anybody told me, I could make something out of it. I remember the first time I met Elizabeth Taylor. Now here she is, one of the most beautiful women in the world. And at this time, she was still quite beautiful. And she came down the stairs. It was a duplex hotel suite. And she came down the stairs looking exactly like her picture. Now, many famous people do not look like their picture, but she did. And she came right up to me. And I said, oh, I said, you have the most beautiful skin. She said, would you like to feel it? I said, okay. She said, here. And she took my hand and she put my hand on her face. I said, wow, your skin is so smooth. I said, what's your secret? And she said, sesame oil. I put sesame oil all over my body. I said, well, I'm going to try some for sure. And then I said, is that the ring? And I looked down at this 33 karat Krupp diamond, which was this very famous diamond that Richard Burton had given her, right? I said, is that it? She knew what I meant. She said, yeah, would you like to see it? I said, okay. So she took it off her finger and she just tossed it across the room into my lap. And I looked at it and I was thinking to myself, gee, this ring doesn't look as shiny as I thought it was going to. I mean, it was this huge diamond, but it was dull looking to me. And I didn't want to insult her, of course. This is the Krupp diamond. I said, wow. And then I said, do you want it back? And she laughed and I tossed it back to her. Now, I know this sounds all so inane, but this warms up the room a little bit, I was genuinely interested in the diamond and in her skin. And then we got right down to business and she talked about the AIDS epidemic, which was raging at this time. And she was practically yelling across the room about the prejudice in the world against people who were contracting HIV. And it was, and again, once somebody gets rolling and they start talking in an expressive way, you cannot interrupt them.
Yeah, one of the things too that really strikes me about what you're talking about, and really the skill that you've developed, that I believe it sounds like you've kind of learned it on your own, but I also believe that it can be taught, which is, and you said it before, which is the ability to develop a rapport with people and to be genuinely interested with people. I feel like, and I don't know what your thoughts are on the way the world is today, I feel like it is a skill that people are lacking, rapport, the ability to connect with people and to be genuinely interested in people. What's your take on that with technology and how that's working? Because I feel like, I'll get something on LinkedIn and it's just like, hey, Mike, I'm trying to sell you something, and without really knowing, or there'll be a general kind of message saying, hey, I looked at your company and here's why my company can work for you. What's your take on how these tools, and even like LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram, do you feel like they're kind of eroding that skill set that is critical for human beings, which is building rapport?
Well, use your people skills. That's really what you're talking about. You must be vulnerable and emotionally open with people, whether it's through your humor or anything. But yes, looking down at your computer all day long or your cell phone, that all happened later, but during the time I was doing this and still doing it, I do think that you must use your people skills, and people skills have to do with establishing an emotional rapport with somebody. And you mustn't be intimidated, which is why many people are hiding in their devices. You got to tell a joke. You got to tell something personal that relates to something they're interested in. This is where the skill is. If you do your homework, you will know what they're interested in. So I always tell people, take at least 10 minutes to get warmed up and make eye contact. Eye contact is important. Establish, some warmth. If they're a dog lover, for example, show them a picture of your dog. I've done it a million times because I'm a dog lover. As you know, I wrote a whole book about my dog. That the book party was hosted by Calvin Klein and Judge Judy. We had 350 guests and 15 photographers all shouting the name of my dog. Now, if I can write a book about a dog, you can write a book about anything. But I always said as before, don't start by asking direct questions. And first impressions are very important. Remember, I know I've read this in many studies. People make their minds up about you in the first 15 to 30 seconds. That's fast. That's very fast. So for example, when I interviewed Meryl Streep, the hotel door opened and she was standing there and she said to me, I'm watching I Love Lucy reruns. Would you like to watch them with me? I said, oh, yes, I would. That's how that one started. When I interviewed Paul Newman, he answered the door himself and he said, I'm making ice cubes. Would you like to help me in the kitchen? I thought, what is he talking about? I said, well, why are you making ice cubes? He said, it's my daughter's birthday tonight. And so I stood in the kitchen filling up the ice cube trays with Paul Newman. It doesn't have to be famous people, but yes, you must establish some kind of rapport. And any little story that you could tell about yourself that's self-effacing or funny, but by the way, they don't want to know too much. Don't tell them too much. Nobody wants to know too much. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but even in social situations, somebody will start telling you a story. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, is this story ever going to end? Because some people do not know how to tell an anecdote. They go on and on. They don't know where to stop. You got to know when to let the other person, you have to gauge these things as you're going, and that's another skill that I kind of learned maybe. But one thing that is kind of unusual, you didn't mention this, but it's kind of a painful chapter of my life. You may wonder, well, why would I do this? Why would I be interested in doing this kind of work? Because this isn't something that you could go to college for, really. Well, when I was young, I was a very poor student. I had very, very low self-regard. I was not athletic. I was not popular. And I got all D's and F's. And my mother and father were very upset with me, my mother especially. And they did all kinds of psychological testing. And eventually they brought me into the principal's office when I was about in 5th grade. And they told me and my mother together that I had a very low IQ. But the principal said, don't worry, garbage collectors can be happy too.
Wow.
And this was very disturbing, especially to my mother, who was very angry at me because they thought I wasn't trying hard in school. It turns out I wasn't intellectually stupid, but I was emotionally disturbed by the way I was being treated. So therefore, I wasn't paying attention and I wasn't motivated. It wasn't until around 8th and 9th grade that I got more motivated. And eventually I got C minuses and Bs, and eventually I got Bs and As, and eventually I got all As by 12th grade. But I never could forget what they told me. And years later, I had a syndicated column that was syndicated by the Tribune company. And every week I wrote a new column. And one of my columns was called 88 Secrets to Confidence. And there was a picture of me as a kid playing the piano with my legs kind of dangling by the pedals. And I tell the story about how I started in life with such low self-esteem, being told I was stupid. And I tell people nowadays, listen, if I, with a low IQ and no experience as a writer, could write a book that becomes a bestseller, then you can write anything.
Wow, man, that's powerful. Yeah, I didn't know that about you. And I do want to ask you about that moment when you heard that, basically that you weren't worthy of anything. And you just, kind of your trajectory in life was just going to be capped. And I want to ask you about how you used that and harnessed it in a second. We are on with Glenn Plaskin. We met on this app called Clubhouse. It's just an amazing, amazing app where you can connect with people so quickly. I feel like Glenn and I feel like we've known each other forever. We've never actually met in person yet. This is the second time we've seen each other right here on Zoom, but we've talked several times and we've also, connected on Clubhouse. He is a prolific writer. He's a ghostwriter. He is a New York Times bestselling author. If you'd like some more information about Glenn, you can go to ghostwriteyourbook.com. Again, ghostwriteyourbook.com. You can just Google him. He's also on Instagram as well. The last name is spelled Plaskin. Again, if you want more information, just go ahead and go to his website and he will get back to you. He'll also respond to you as well on Instagram. So now that moment, I've had a similar moment where my guidance counselor told me that college wasn't for everybody. And it really, it damages you at that moment, I think. Right. And you think about how painful it is to hear something like that. But do you think that moment when you were told that, a trash man can be happy too, which by the way is this sweatshirt that I'm wearing is from my trash man. His name is Jason, and he's got his own little side business. And you know what? He's making people don't realize it. He makes 6 figures as a trash man. So it's an honorable profession. Back then, though, it was really kind of looked down upon. And I get that. So, but do you think?
Well, that was just a metaphor for
I understand. Yeah.
failure,
But do you think that metaphor? No, there you are. Do you think that metaphor or that statement, even though it was painful, really drove you and like inside said, was really telling the world, like, you know what, I'm going to prove this guy wrong? Well,
no, this wasn't conscious. A child cannot process this or just tell themselves, it was subconscious. But what happened to me is I didn't have low self-esteem. I had no self-esteem. And what happened is I found a talent through music that got me more attention. And so what I used to do is dream about stardom and famous people. I think it was actually a way of my psyche not to go crazy. So I would escape. And in my report cards, you can read all of them. It says, all he does is stare out the window and dream. And what they didn't know what I was dreaming about, but I was dreaming about something greater than my humdrum existence. I didn't realize that at the time I needed something exciting that could drive me toward it. Nowadays, you know, they call it visualization, but as a child, I didn't know exactly what I was doing. But I remember once when President Kennedy was assassinated, I stood transfixed in a drugstore going over and over these magazines, looking at Jacqueline Kennedy, thinking, oh my God, how brave this woman is. Never dreaming that just, 15 years later, I would be having lunch with her. That's surreal. That's just totally surreal. But I visualized this. And then what happened is when one dream didn't work out, which was music, as I told you, I had to come up with another dream. And I this wasn't really conscious per se, but I was drawn to the world of celebrity. I think, and you're right, by the way, if I hadn't had the experience of being told I was going to amount to nothing, then I never in the world would have gone to all the trouble to meet all those hundreds of famous people. I could have sold insurance. I could have, become a lawyer, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted something that was much greater adventure than that. So I always tell people what I was really using before I even knew I was using it was the power of visualization, which is a mental technique that uses your imagination to create a picture of your future as you want it to be. It's like a mental rehearsal. And I would rehearse over and over again. I want to meet the First Lady. I want to meet Calvin Klein. I want to meet Elizabeth Taylor. I want to meet this one or whoever it would be. And anything that you can visualize, you can potentially make true. For example, once I wanted to put together a group of celebrities for Oprah. And I'd been told by another TV show, The Donahue Show, that every celebrity I came up with wasn't good enough for their show. So one day I just called up the Oprah show and I spoke to a producer and I said, listen, The Donahue Show doesn't want me. See, that's a great example of the way I used to do things. I would make jokes. Most people would say, hello, my name is such and such. I would like to be on your show. I never did stuff like that. I would come in a more familiar way, and I would say, they don't want me, but I've got some good people. Would you consider Marla Maples and Rod Steiger and Angie Dickinson, who at the time was, still quite gorgeous? And they said, we'll take it. Well, people say, how did you get on Oprah? I said, that's how I got on Oprah. I told them that another TV show, was giving me a hard time. How would you like this? So what I'm saying is I visualize this stuff. And I used to literally just dream. At night, I would just dream this stuff up. And in the morning, I would have a piece of paper by the bed and I would write down all the stuff. If you saw some of the notes I had, it looked like maybe someone who was just going to get out of a mental hospital. But I still to this day use envelopes every day. I have all these envelopes to myself that have all my dream ideas on them. And some days I'll work on one aspect of it. Some days I'll work on another aspect. But I really do believe that if you can dream it or visualize it, then you can make it come true. And a lot has been written about visualization. Napoleon Hill wrote a lot about it in his thing about success. And visualization, it helps you focus on what you really want. And it boosts your mood because you have something to look forward to. You know what I mean? They've even proven that it increases your alpha brainwaves. So I always think if I could give anybody a tip, my tip is visualize what it is you want. But remember, you can't just grab it. It's a people business. You have to relate to people. And, everybody has pain. I have, you've had pain, I'm sure, in your life. And you're right. You can mine your pain and learn something from it. And, you're stronger because of it. It doesn't mean you still don't have it, though, because I still have it. And I'm often still like I was when I was 9 years old. I'll get very nervous before something. I'll begin to think to myself, I can't do it. It's too hard. I just can't do this. I don't want to do it. And I'll spiral down into fear. And remember, the acronym for fear, FEAR, is false expectations appearing real. And in the moment of fear, trust me, it appears pretty real. But you have to push past your discomfort. Even today, before this interview, I was thinking, I don't know if I can do this. What am I going to say that's going to be of any interest to anybody?
I don't. You know what? I'm not buying that for a second, Glenn. I'm going to call bullshit on that. I'm only kidding. So when you think about though what Zig Ziglar said and what Napoleon Hill talks about in The Law of Success, and you think about visualization, because Napoleon Hill does talk a lot about that. But one of the keys, though, that in order for your the things that you visualize in order to become a reality is that next step of action, right? And that's the part that it sounds like that I tell people dreaming's for sleeping, and you use the word visualization a lot more than the word dream, which I think they're two different things. So, tell me a little bit about the action. So, you're visualizing, I want to interview this person. I want to do this. I want to do that. Let's talk about the next step, which is the most important, to turn that visualization into a reality.
Yeah, well, what I do is I change background so you can see this. I have all these envelopes.
There they are.
Here's my current list of envelopes. And every envelope has a different
Why do they all say my name? It just says my name over and over and over again.
There's a method to my madness on each envelope. And every day I pull out a new envelope. You can see it'll tell what time is what.
Yeah.
Hold
on. Do you have those from like way back? Do you keep them all?
No.
Okay.
I keep throwing them out.
All right.
But I have a big supply of envelopes right in the drawer. Now, here they all are. See?
and you use the envelopes to take notes. You don't have like a notebook like this. You're using the envelopes because that's your method.
Well, that's not to take notes. That's my to-do list. To take notes, I have one of these.
Right.
But I usually record. I record everything with a digital recorder, and then I have it transcribed. I don't want to be taking notes when I'm talking to you. But you talked about action. Okay, a lot of people have dreams, but they procrastinate. Oh yeah, I'm going to do that later. I'll do that next week. I'm too busy right now. Or, I've heard all the excuses from myself and from others. I find that once you are stimulated emotionally to do something, you will do it. Like I wrote a book about my dog, and I wrote the whole book in 5 months. And I only work in the morning. I don't like to write in the afternoon, and I don't like to write on the weekends either. And I don't like to write at night either. Have you heard all these requirements?
When do you write? When do you write?
I only write in the morning. I won't do it in the afternoon. I won't do it on the weekend. I won't do it in the evening. I just won't. So what I do is I sit down absolutely like I'm going to work, like at 8:30 a.m. or whatever it is. And I always mark down the time I start. And then you can't look at the phone. You can't look at your email. You can't answer the phone. You can only get up for 2 reasons. If you need a glass of water or you go to the bathroom, that's it. And so for 3 hours or so, I will just focus totally. And I find when you lose yourself in what you're concentrating on, you can get a lot done. So when you say take action, I think action requires something that a lot of people have trouble with, which is focus. I did a whole interview with someone who wrote a book about distractive, we live in a very distracted culture, the absolute opposite of the power of now, which is the distractibility in the culture, which is this impulse. And it's irresistible to constantly check your email, and your text messages and all this stuff. And I've fallen into that at times as well too. But when I'm actually writing something, I just can't do that. The world must disappear. It's like taking a nap. When you're taking a nap, you don't want to be bothered. So when you're working, you don't want to be bothered. So you have to take action and really focus. And you'd be amazed at how much you could get done in 3 hours if you didn't have any distractions, And so one thing that I'm good at, I think, and I probably got it from all those hours of practicing the piano, which is in order to do the piano thing, you really have to focus. Remember, I'm playing hundreds, thousands of notes, that are coming out of my fingers. You cannot think about anything else. It's the same thing with anything. I think if you focus on what you really want, you're more likely to be able to do it. Not that it isn't difficult, because it is, at times it's difficult. And then other times it isn't. Sometimes it just flows. You know what I mean?
I like that idea too of picking a time and giving yourself like, this is when I'm going to do it, when I'm going to do a particular thing. So that way there it becomes habit. Has your life pretty much been like this for a long period of time, that every morning for 3 hours you write? Because you hear about, I think even Napoleon Hill would talk about, he would just read at certain hours of the day, or you hear other successful people say, well, in fact, Zig Ziglar, who I just mentioned, he said that he would read for 3 hours a day, and he would start, I think, at noontime. So from 12 to 3, he was always reading. Do you consistently maintain that as part of your daily routine?
Yeah. Every morning, my mother used to make fun of me, because when I would come down to practice the piano, she would make fun of me. She would say, he looks like he's going somewhere. He gets all dressed, he starts at exactly the same time every time. And it's like, I was always like very rigorous about, starting at an even time of the hour, meaning I don't like starting at like 9, 10 a.m. I like starting right at 9 a.m., but whatever time I start, I write it down. And then the reason I write it down is because that way I can't get up again until at least 2 hours pass. I want to know exactly what minute I got up again. So if I start at 9:10, then I really don't want to get up from my chair. I feel guilty if I get up before like 12:10. But even putting that aside, all I'm saying is, no matter when you want to work, some people are night people or whatever. I think, everybody knows what time of the day they concentrate the best, right? Like, what time of the day do you concentrate the best?
I don't know, man. As I'm listening to you, I don't know that. For me, it's actually a little bit different, where I have certain routines, but as it comes to writing, I have found that whenever it comes to me, I write. So if I have to write on this thing here, I'm writing on my phone. If I have to write and I don't have the phone, I have paper, I'm writing on paper. If it's in an email, I'm writing. So I'm I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but that's kind of how it works for me. I do try to sit down, like, when I've decided to write things, I say, okay, well, I am going to sit down and just start writing. But then from there, I think it was you actually, I think it was you who said this in one of the rooms in Clubhouse. I'm not sure, but the writing process, I think a lot of writers or wannabe authors feel as though that they actually have to physically write something down or physically type something into the computer, when in fact, you're writing all the time, right? In your brain. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be put onto the paper. So for me, I don't know. It's kind of all over the place.
Sometimes I dictate things. Like this afternoon, I got a new idea for a chapter, a book I'm writing. I have 6 books that are coming out, and I have 3 in production. So there's a lot of books swirling in my mind. And I got an idea for a new chapter today, just the first 2 sentences. So I just dictated those first 2 sentences on my iPhone, and I sent myself an email. I often send myself emails lately. If I get any idea, I'll just send myself an email. And then the next day I deal with, whatever I sent myself. Because if you do get a good idea that springs into your brain, right, you want to take advantage of it. But regardless of, people listening, maybe a lot of people listening to your podcast are people who have written books, who want to write books, or maybe, entrepreneurs in any business. Anything I'm saying is really just common sense. Like, focus is important. People skills are important. And then
being disciplined, like what you said too, as well. I mean, that's a key element, one of the key elements of success, right? Again, Napoleon Hill, like we keep talking about, he talks about, being able to have a clear mind and being disciplined in things as simple things as your diet, right?
Yeah, it permeates every part of your life, exercising, eating right, relaxing. I'm becoming really good at relaxing. It's like all I want. I think I could get a doctoral degree in watching television. I love watching movies and, suspenseful things. I use those things as escapes. I remember once going to interview Michael J. Fox, and I had to see the movie first. So they screened the movie for me in a movie theater. It was just me.
Which movie? Was it complete? Was it Back to the Future?
It was after that movie. I think it was called Doc Hollywood, if you remember that movie.
Yeah.
But anyway, I remember having a bad back that day, and I decided I'd be more comfortable lying on the floor watching the movie. So there I was in this movie theater, all alone, watching the movie on my back. And whatever works, desperation is the mother of invention. For me, it's been kind of a weird career because I never really planned any of this out. And you mentioned that I collaborate and ghostwrite books too. And that was just accidental as well. A celebrity once came to me and I had interviewed him for a magazine and he liked what I had written. And he said, "Had you ever thought about writing a book with somebody?" I had never thought of it. That was the first time I ever thought of it. I didn't set out to become a ghostwriter, but this person asked me if I was interested. And to make a long story short, we wound up having a 1.5-year adventure together all around the world. He took me to Australia and Fiji and Palm Springs and Vancouver. And it was a truly life-changing, magical experience. I would call it not ghostwriting so much as collaborating, and that gave me an idea that, other people needed help with writing books. And so that is something that's become a specialty of mine. And they're all different. Like I've written books for motivational speakers. A pastor in Chicago hired me, this pastor of a megachurch. And I turned him down when I got the job from the agent. I said, "No, I don't think so. I don't know anything about the Bible. I don't want to know anything about the Bible." So I said, "I don't think so." So they hired somebody else. And I gave up a fairly significant job because I was afraid. And then they came back to me and they said, "Well, we want to show you what the other writer did." And I looked at what the other writer did. And honestly, it was really bad. And I thought I could do better than this. So I rewrote it and I sent it in and they said, "Well, we'd like to hire you." Well, to make a long story short, they did hire me. And we made a deal. I said, "I don't know anything about the Bible. I'm not even that religion or anything." So I said, "I'll write all the book about chapters on forgiveness or whatever it is, but the preacher has to plug in all the Bible stories, plug them in, and then I'll rewrite them." So that's the way we wrote the book. He would plug in all the biblical stories. I would have nothing to do with it. And then I would, and so there's always a way. So even if you don't know anything about the subject, you can still do it. And I'll show you a couple of recent examples if you give me 1 second.
Sure. We are on with Glenn Plaskin. He is a prolific author, ghostwriter, and he just grabbed a couple of books and he's going to show us. If you want more information about Glenn, you can go to ghostwritingbook.com. I was just doing a little interlude there, Glenn, when you grabbed those books. So, all right. So, yeah, what do you got? Let's see.
Well, I specialize in writing books about things I know nothing about. That's the key to my success. If I'm telling you, if I can do it, you can do it. Like, here's a book called Running with My Head Down. This guy owned the largest a sports franchise for kids in the United States. And he wanted to write a book about how he created a franchise from nothing. Franchising is his business. He sold this company for about $30 million a couple years ago and wanted to write a book about how he did it. So this book is very baseball and sports related. Now, I know nothing about sports. Nevertheless, we did it. Here's a book that just came out this month. It's called Staying Alive, after the Bee Gees song. It's the story of an Emmy Award-winning CNN producer who was a Marine who was in the Iraq War. Then he came home and was homeless. Then he got cancer and almost died. And then he prevailed and became a producer at CNN. So this is a book about how he did all this before the age of 25. Here's a book that just came out March 2nd. It's called On the Road Less Traveled. This book is about a Wall Street millionaire who grew up in an orphanage his entire life. He had no mother, no father. He grew up in an orphanage, and yet he became successful. I know nothing about Wall Street either. This is a book about recovery from drug addiction I wrote. This guy owns the largest sweet potato farm in the United States, and he wanted to write a book about how he recovered from drug addiction. So I only show these things just to illustrate that there's a great variety, you know, and there's one thing that makes all these stories one common thread, which is it's the human experience of trying to move forward in the world. You know, we're all trying to move forward in our lives. What's the next right step to take? You know, whether it's in your personal life or your business or your work, whatever it is, everybody's trying to figure out, you know, what is the next right step? And so if you can turn these stories into human emotions, then my knowledge of baseball or business or whatever, it's true I'm a quick study, but you know, you can study anything, but you got to learn how to, you know, tell the story. And I think one thing that I'm good at is there's nothing more deadly than a chronology. Oh, then I went to school, then I went here, then I went there. Oh, nobody wants to hear that. But if you can capture the reader and recreate a scene, how did it look? How did it smell? You know, what was it like? If you can tell a story, then it will draw people in. Tony Robbins always says that people learn lessons best with stories. That's why he's always telling stories to illustrate his points. He doesn't tell the points to illustrate his stories. He starts with the story itself. And so all these, you know, what are books? They're just stories, right?
Right. You know, Glenn, we don't have a lot of time left, but before I let you go, you know, like you said, we do have a lot of entrepreneurs, business people. Some are authors, some maybe have thought about writing a book, and I think this is a kind of we're kind of getting into that. You've led up to it for me, which is, so let's say someone listening or watching right now wants to write a book, but they don't know where to start, or maybe they want to hire someone like yourself, like a ghostwriter. You know, what are some of the things that they need to be concerned with, or some of the things they need to think about to kind of start that process?
Well, first of all, I offer a 20-minute consultation, you know, for free, no problem. You know, I'm willing to talk to somebody. If somebody wants to call me up and, you know, talk a little bit about what their dream is, you know, they can contact me through ghostwriteyourbook.com, no problem. Just, you know, fill in the contact slip, send it to me, and I'll email you. So that's number one. But if you do want to write a book, I believe that some people can do it on their own. Some people need help, you know. And so it's up to you. Everybody has a different budget, a different goal. A lot of your people who come to Clubhouse, I think, are entrepreneurs, and they have a very specific, defined message. They have a service they're offering the world, right? And or a lot of them are coaches or inspirational kinds of people. There's no new thing you can write. Everything has essentially been almost written. Maybe I'm wrong to some extent, but what makes each book distinct is your personality. It's like a fingerprint. There are no two fingerprints alike. So I always tell authors, what you want to do is most bring out your flavor. It's like cooking. You know, you want to make the chicken maybe spicy or whatever it is, but everybody has a different life experience. And so although you may be writing a business book, probably a lot of the things you're talking about have already been written about in one way or another. But if you can bring your own story to the book, that's something that's really unique and valuable, I think. And so I believe that everybody has a story within them, you know, just waiting to be written. Everybody has a book inside them. And you have I have been to your room, and I've been around the block. After all, I'm nearly 40. And
no.
Oh yeah, I know it's hard to believe,
Okay.
but I've got to tell you, you really have some incredibly talented people in your room. I'm not just saying that. I mean, I was there the other night, and some of these people are, wow. They're brilliant at knowing how to market a book, which is not my specialty. Remember, my specialty is writing the book, not marketing the book. But nowadays, you need a lot of tools that, and you've mastered this. This is, one of your prime businesses. You wrote a whole book about it. You've mastered this art of how to market a book. There's a whole art to that in itself. So authors need you even once they've written the book, right? So there's basically two parts. One is you have to produce the book, but then the book is no good unless you can market it, right?
Right.
And
I would disagree with you. I think you are a magnificent marketer, and I wrote down one of the things, that you talked about earlier, and people are talking about this now just in a different way. They're talking about leveraging other people's audiences, and you have done that since the very beginning of time, not time, but since the very, very beginning of your career by leveraging the power of celebrity, man. I mean, I don't think there's been anybody better at it than you.
Well, there's a service in New York called Celebrity Service. It's the largest celebrity service in the world. And they once wrote an article about me, and they said, in the cutthroat world of celebrity journalism, nobody gets the big names more than Glenn Plaskin, which was a great compliment. And people have often asked me, well, how did you do that? Because remember, I'm kind of shy, actually. And remember, I was told I have a low IQ. So you might think to myself, well, how did he do it? Well, I think relationships are like building bridges, like you build a bridge to one person but you don't do it manipulatively. It's not like, oh, I'm going to be friends with you because you're going to introduce me to somebody else. That's not what I did. I made these connections organic and genuine, meaning when I would become very close to somebody, it would naturally happen that they might introduce me to somebody else, or sometimes not. But oftentimes one would lead to another naturally. And then I got to the point where I had done so many interviews that I actually didn't need introductions anymore. All I would need to do is send them, the other interviews that I did. And then they would want to do an interview. Remember, you always want to make somebody want to do it. You don't want to persuade them to do it. You want to make them feel genuinely that what they're going to do with you is valuable. In other words, what I was offering them was, of course, a big audience in a magazine or a newspaper, but I wanted them to feel special. Like here, when I interviewed Donald Trump for Playboy magazine, he gave me a cumulative amount of about 12 hours over a period of 3 months. He gave me more time than he's ever given anybody for an interview. This was a number of years ago. Well, why would he do that? Donald Trump wanted to be on the cover of Playboy magazine. So we were offering him something valuable, and he in turn was giving something back that was very valuable, which was his time, And then after the interview, I told him I want to interview Marla Maples, which at that time was his second wife, and she was very sought after as an interview subject. And he said to me, well, I'll introduce you to her, but it's up to her. So he said, she'll have a drink with you. So he did it. He arranged that I would go to a hotel and have a drink with her. I had a drink with her, and the word came back that she would do the interview. Notice he didn't force her to do it. He just said, I'll introduce you to her. And that's so often the way it's happened for me, is that one person would kind of build a bridge to another person. But remember, it's always up to you to build a genuine emotional connection. I'm not a fake person. Like, it's very hard for me to hide how I'm feeling. So if I like you, then I feel that way about it. And I think you can build a really good connection. And sometimes funny things happen. I once was leaving the home of a very famous actress, and as she walked me out to the street, there were other people staring at her. And she looked up at me and she said, you look better than you used to. And I looked at her and I said, is that a compliment? And she said, well, you can take it however you like. I thought that was very funny. I think she was insulting me. She was saying, well, you didn't used to look too good, but you look better than you used to. And I said, well, okay, thanks. But these funny moments do happen. One time I brought this famous movie star a chocolate cake, and I said, "Look what I brought you." And I had gone to a lot of trouble. I went to this place that's supposed to have the best chocolate cake. And she lifted up the lid of the cake box. She looked at it and she said, "This cake is much too good for lunch. I'll have it for dinner." And the cake disappeared. Never did taste the cake myself, but you know.
But it's about that. It's about the relationships and building the relationships. And again, I think you've been a master at it. And you know, regardless of where we are in history, as far as the technology that's out there to be able to develop relationships, I think the skill sets that you've developed over the years are just been remarkable. And your life.
Thank you.
Your life is interesting, man. It's so interesting.
Thank you. And I encourage people, you know, Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all of it. I use these things, and I like looking at the pictures, and I like seeing everybody's adventures and everything. But ultimately, it's like 1,000 is not enough and 1 is too many. Do you know, I know many people who will not call on the phone. I have asked people, "Will you call me on the phone?" They won't do it. I know somebody who's having relationships with people he's never met, literally. He's never talked to them, and he's never met them in person. I said, "Well, how do you call this a relationship? You've never even literally called them on the phone or Zoomed or met them." He said, "Oh, no, you can have a complete relationship and never even meet them or talk to them." I really think this is tragic.
It is tragic. But you know what? You, again, have just been so gracious for spending your time with me and with our viewers and listeners. And again, I appreciate you being here. I love your stories. You know, we're probably going to have to do this again because I don't even think we've scratched the surface of Glenn and his life and his stories are just, you know, just remarkable. And so if you'd like some more information about Glenn, you can, you know, by the way, I don't know if anyone caught this, but he said, if you go to ghostwriteryourbook.com, put in your information, he'll give you a free 20-minute consultation. He'll talk to you about whatever it is that you want to do within the book world. He's not, you know, don't just talk to you just to talk to him. But if you're thinking about writing a book, if you may be thinking about, you know, having someone ghostwrite your book, 20 minutes with Glenn, you know, I've, you know, known him not too long, but I know enough about him to know that 20 minutes of his time is worth a lot of money, and he's given it to you and our viewers and listeners for free. So again, go to ghostwriteryourbook.com. Again, it's ghostwriteryourbook.com. You can just Google Glenn. Like you said, he's also on Instagram. He'll respond there, but he does just would prefer that you go to the ghostwriteryourbook.com, put in your information and reach out to him. So Glenn, you know, I want to thank you again for being here. You've really enriched my life already, and I'm really excited to see where our relationship goes in the future. Thanks again for being here. My name is Michael Alden. That's Glenn Plaskin, and we'll see you soon. Hey, it's Mike Alden. I hope you're enjoying the Alden Report as much as I am. I love bringing to you new and exciting people that add value to your life. I'm also super excited to announce my latest book, Bestseller Secrets. Listen, if you're an author, maybe you're thinking about writing a book, maybe you've already written a book, maybe you're an entrepreneur and you want to continue to grow your brand, maybe you're an entrepreneur and you want to bring in more leads, maybe you're a stay-at-home mom and you wrote a cookbook or a children's book, maybe you wrote a fantasy book, a self-help book, a tell-all book, a novel. It doesn't really matter. In my latest book, Bestseller Secrets, I give you all the information that I've literally spent millions of dollars trying to figure this thing out, and I'm going to give it to you absolutely free with my book, Bestseller Secrets. Go to bestsellersecretsbook.com. Again, it's bestsellersecretsbook.com. I give you all the information that I've spent literally millions of dollars trying to figure this whole world out. My books have gone on to do amazing things. I'm a 3-time Wall Street Journal, USA Today bestselling author. I've hit #1 on Amazon hundreds of times. My books have been the #1 book in the world against all books in every category. And I've also done this for other authors. And I'm giving you this information absolutely free. Just go to bestsellersecretsbook.com. You got to pay a small processing fee, but it doesn't really matter, again, because I've spent millions of dollars. And here's the other secret. You can do all this stuff yourself. If you don't have a team, that's okay. If you don't have a lot of time, that's okay. You read the information in my book, again, whether you just started writing a book, whether you've written the book, whether you wrote the book years ago, and you want to kind of resurrect it. In my book, Bestseller Secrets, I show you exactly what you need to do, and I'm giving you the book absolutely free. Go to bestsellersecretsbook.com, download the book, take that information, use it to become a bona fide, legitimate #1 bestseller. I show you how to become a #1 bestseller in less than 24 hours. And again, I'm giving you this information for free. Go to bestsellersecretsbook.com. Again, it's bestsellersecretsbook.com.